Hey y'all, it's Kalia Monique. My first name's Kalia, my middle name's Monique. It's Kalia Monique, and today we will be talking about my top 10 books of 2022. I'm not gonna lie, I've been quite anxious when it comes to filming this video. Even though I have quite a high rating for my books of 2023, it was like 4 point something. Let's check. Actually, I don't feel like it. Even though I had a pretty high overall rating for my books of 2022, it was like a 4 point something along the lines. I still was just like, in comparison to the previous year, 2021, it just felt pretty mediocre. There was no books that I felt like I was screaming at the hilltop just like, you need to read this. And then I went through my list of books that made this list and just my reads of 2022, and I was like, oh, I'm a lie. Yes, I did not read as many books as I read in 2021, but the quality of the books was so much better, and I am so excited to share these 10 books with you all today. I love them so much. So let's get into it. I'm going to be ordering these books from my 10th favorite book to my first, and number 10 on this list is The Blood Trials by N.E. Davenport. This book, first of all, it is the only book on this list that did not receive 5 stars. All the rest of them have received 5 stars, and this one I rated a 4.5, although I am regretting that now because the way I cannot get away from this book. Like, mentally, I am still reading this book. Mentally, I'm still in love with these characters and truly wanting the best for them. It is just so great. This is also a book that made me cry unexpectedly. I keep mentioning this whenever I bring up this book, but yeah, it really was that unexpected. For the most part in reading the book, I was like, oh, it's a good book. This is a good story. I like the characters. I like the plot progression. I'm liking it all. The plot was kind of fast, kind of rushed a bit, but I'm enjoying it. It's great. And then a particular thing happened, and I was like, this book is making me cry in public at work. Oh no. I literally was like, I have a meeting in a few minutes. I need to get it together. My nose is red. My eyes, like, there's literally clearly streaks of tears. My eyes are red. I just look a mess. It's so great. So let's talk about The Blood Trials. The Blood Trials is set in the world of the Republic of Marine. This republic has a great enemy who is coined the Blood Emperor, and he has coined that name due to his blood gift. So something I found quite fascinating with The Blood Trials is that there is a mix of fantasy and sci-fi within it. So on the Blood Emperor side, they are individuals who have these magical abilities that they are able to yield with their blood, and with this ability they can control people's minds. They're really strong. They're given, like, I guess, superhuman strength. And on the other side is the Republic of Marine, in which there are these people called the Praetorians. I always struggle to say that name, but there are a group of people called the Praetorians who are essentially the army of the Republic. They are also given these gifts, but that is done so more so through devices and technology, and like a shot they are given that gives them their strength. And so they're essentially are like the fantasy people who are fighting the sci-fi people. Putting it as simple as it possibly can, got fantasy fighting sci-fi and sci-fi fighting fantasy. The main world that we focus on is the sci-fi element. Like I said, we're following a young girl by the name of Akina, and she is the granddaughter of this high general in this society of the Republic of Marine. He is like a legatist, which again is like this really high general in the Praetorian army. He basically leads the entire thing. Due to mysterious circumstances, he actually passes on, and while Akina was on the path to beginning the Praetorian trials, she decides in her grief not to, and she is just sent on a track of sadness and despair, and all that she has worked for her entire life seems to be going in the trash as she tries to grieve but not so much acknowledge the passing of her grandfather who raised her. That is until she finds out that her grandfather's death might not be all as mysterious and natural as it was presented, and that in fact he was more than likely assassinated. And so Akinna goes on a mission to join the Praetorian trials because they are the closest option that she is going to have in figuring out who killed her grandfather, and begin her vengeance mission, her revenge mission. Akinna as a main character is, I found myself loving her while also being completely frustrated with her. I was like, I know I can't tell you how to grieve. Trust me, sis. I get it. I know that I can't tell you how to grieve. And I know grief definitely alters your senses and all that you go through. But ma'am, if you can just notice the gray in the world, that'd be nice, because everything for her was like black and white. She didn't even try to infer with the person that gave her the information that her grandfather had passed away, and she just was like, this person is my enemy, and was just gung-ho at getting at this person who the other person had suggested might have killed her grandfather. He even was like, the prime suspect is this guy, he might have killed your grandfather. And she was like, he killed him and I must kill him. And I was like,
system malfunction.
He's the prime suspect. And you're just like, yep, he did it. He must die now. Ma'am, can we do a little detective work? Can we be a little not so on the nose about things? Can we might infer, use our own resources, our own mental abilities to come to our own conclusions? No. The first person that was suggested, the first name that came up, she was like, he killed my grandfather and I must kill him. So that quite annoyed me with this book. Nonetheless, there were instances and discussions that came up when it came to grief and not wanting to acknowledge the pain that is brought to you when you lose someone who is so close and dear to your heart, someone who raised you, who loved you, who has been there for your entirety of your life. Not to mention Akinna herself holds within her the blood gift, so somewhere along her lineage, she was given the ability to have a blood gift. Although she is in the society, the scientific society, the Praetorian side, she holds within her the blood gift. And if she is ever found to have this ability, it can cost her her life. She is also a young black woman and a highly racist society, and a woman overall in a quite misogynist society. I mean, literally, the Praetorians, the Republic, they're all a-holes as people. Like, they suck. Like, even the ones that are okay are just okay. Everyone is annoying in this society. Everyone sucks. I cannot stand them all. Like, they annoy me. It's completely racist. It's completely misogynistic. And throughout it all, it's just this young black girl trying to figure out who killed her grandfather and seek her revenge. I mean, my goodness. She's just so great. Like, I care for her deeply. She makes dumb decisions, but I still care for her deeply in her, like, imperfect, reactive, just sometimes self-destructing self. I can't help but root for her as a main character. Next up at number 9, I have The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is Tiffany D. Jackson's Carrie retelling of sorts that follows Maddie, who is our Carrie of the moment. And Maddie is mixed with both black and white, although she passes as white. Maddie was also raised by her extremely racist father. Like, what the hell? With her passing as white, her father forces her to pass as white and forces her to tell people that she is white, and tells everyone on her documents, on everything, that she is white. And so for a long time, in her 17 years of life, I believe that she's 17, she has passed as a white girl. That is until one day in gym, she is running the track and it starts to rain. And one thing about our hair, you cannot hide certain things when wet. Okay, it is what it is. And Maddie ends up having to deal with a lot of ridicule, a lot of bullying that she was already facing as an outcast with who her father is. She was already an outcast, but when they find out she's black, oh, racism comes through so fast. It's like, ooh, it's like a jump scare. Like, they move so quickly in their racism, and I was just like, well. This all takes place in 2014, in which a school in the South decides for the first time to desegregate their prom. You heard me, 2014 this happened in this, what the hell? The US? And the thing is about that it's not far-fetched for the US that somewhere in the South would still have a segregated prom. As I stated, this is like a Carrie retelling, so Maddie is quite special in many ways. I mean, she is such a sweet character. She's so caring and compassionate and just naive, and I just truly want the best for Maddie. But it's Carrie, and it's just, oh, my heart. I loved this book, and it's also told through like a podcast elements in some parts. So there's the podcast elements in which they're recounting the events of 2014, in which the very first desegregated prom of this school, it goes up in flames, as does another prom. Like, it's just, the whole senior class is dead except 2 people. And so through the course of this podcast, the podcaster is presenting this event to a guest star on their podcast and is presenting the facts that they do know. There's a lot of mystery surrounding this prom. Like I said, there's only 2 survivors, and they keep saying that Maddie did it, and we don't know what happened to Maddie. And so in the podcast, they're trying to figure out the mystery of what happened to Maddie, what happened in this prom, because ain't no way a young girl had the power to destroy an entire prom. I mean, she's just a young girl. She's just a little girl. How could she do it? Listen, I love Maddie, okay? Whatever she does, whatever her future is, I stand with Maddie. The way this was presented, the way racism in school was presented, it was so fascinating, so beautiful. Once again, Tiffany D. Jackson makes you angry in just the most eloquent way. I found my rage directed to specific characters, to specific events, things said, and I was just like, I know why I'm angry. And all leading up to that event, and I was like, well, shit, burn it all down. I don't care. I do not care. So that was really great. I just love Maddie. And there was just complexities across all characters. It's not all black and white when it comes to racism, especially if you are in a predominantly white community, in a predominantly white school, and you simply don't know the extent to which this discrimination and abuse is happening. There are a lot of blind spots that you have, and so exploring that in certain characters, exploring the race relationships within this community. And Kenny, as a character, somehow, some way, he captured my heart, because at the beginning, I could not stand him. And then towards the end, I was like, say, Kenny, do whatever you can. I was like, can Kenny be a survivor? I want Kenny to survive. Can he? I want him to, please. Next up at number 8, I have a memoir, which is Unprotected by Billy Porter. This book, oh my god, my heart. I simply was a fan of Billy Porter from his role as Pratel in Pose. And then I read this book, and also I follow him on Instagram, so seeing his looks on the red carpet, I was just like, I love him. I love this man so much. So of course, when his memoir came out, I could not help but pick it up, and I loved it. I mean, talk about heart-wrenching. Talk about just, like, it had okay, pretend my phone is my heart. It had my heart like this. It was grasping onto my heart so firmly. I could not take it. I mean, my goodness. I don't know how else to say this. As a fan of Billy Porter, I just respected him so much more. And of course, like I said, I only knew him in his career as Pratel from Pose, but he had an entire career before that, before I was even born. And so to watch him recount his career prior to me knowing him, and all the struggle that he had to do to be the man that he is when it came to his sexuality, when it came to being a black man and not being masculine enough, but then also not being gay enough, and just really having to find the balance of that, and then having to force a space for him to simply be himself and not be enough. My heart goes out to Billy Porter, because his story is so inspiring and great. Wow. Like, his story is one of those that I'm like, I would have given up so long ago. I just don't have it in me to continuously have to deal with racists, to continuously have to deal with people hating me because of my identity, things that I cannot control about myself, my race, like any of it. Like, he had to deal with people hating him for his race, hating him for his sexuality, hating him for so many different things that you simply cannot control about yourself. And yet he dealt with it. It hurt and harmed him in many ways, and yet he still was able to rise above it. And so beautiful. Also, he very much writes in his voice. It's very dynamic, it's very theatrical, and I loved it. It was a very easy memoir to get to because I was just like, he just exudes like great person to me. Like, he just seems like a really great, kind, nice person, and like a very friendly person as well. And that's what it felt like reading the book. Like, it felt friendly. And the way he explores his anxiety and his mental health as well in writing the books. Like, there was a scene on a plane in which he's experiencing anxiety in the scene, but the way he wrote it also felt very anxious. So I'm like, this is a memoir, and all I'm doing is reading a memoir. Why is my heart racing? I'm not going through this. It was just so well done. As I mentioned before, all the books except for The Blood Trials, I gave 5 stars. So just know from here on out, all books got 5 stars, including The Weight of Blood. Okay, great. In 2022, one of my goals was to read a nonfiction book a month, and I was doing really well with it for a while, except the final months, I had no more in me. I simply could not. But I definitely will want to do that again this year, or just read as many nonfictions as I would like to this year, because with this next book, book number 7, Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford, one of the first memoirs I read, one of my first nonfiction books of the year, and I'm going to tell you now, if it was not for this book, I don't think I would have gone as far as I did when it came to reading nonfiction. I read this book and I was like, I need more. I need more nonfiction. I need more memoirs. I mean, it was so well done. Somebody's Daughter follows the story of a woman who finds out that her father is being released from prison after spending her entire life in early childhood without a father, and just her reflecting on that experience growing up without a father in the home because her dad was in prison. And I mean, my goodness, the familial relationships discussed in this book, especially between a young woman and her grandmother, and then of course, like, the book is called Somebody's Daughter, and so how she explores who she is as somebody's daughter, as her mother's daughter, as her father's daughter, and how people perceive her because of it. So well done. I mean, having to live with your father incarcerated, your mother is the main parent. She is the person who has to be both mom and dad. And because of that, relationships are strained. Her mom is stressed out having to raise her children, as well as just like mother-daughter relationships as they stand. When it comes to this notion that what a young girl wears dictates how grown men view them, and that it is the young girl's responsibility to hide her body to prevent that from happening instead of the grown-ass man who should know better. That being explored in all the complexities of a mother-daughter relationship, all the complexities of loving your father who is incarcerated, and then finding things out about why he was sent away that really warp your interpretation and your thoughts about him and your love, in a sense. So well done. I will also mention, since I've mentioned many books that have quite a few trigger warnings, and that continues to be a theme in my list, I will have the content warnings for all the books that I list down below in the description. All I can do is voice the ones that I can acknowledge, but I have blind spots. I will have them listed down below. I will say both for Somebody's Daughter and Billy Porter's memoir Unprotected, there are discussions of sexual assault that I will again put in the description. Definitely look out for the content warnings, because your mental health is always the number one thing that you should be focused on. You are not me, I am not you. What triggers me might not trigger you, and what triggers you might not trigger me, and we should always have our own well-being and mental health at the forefront of our minds. So of course, in respecting that, I will have all the content warnings for all the books that I mentioned that have content warnings listed down below. And I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be a good majority of this list. Those are my thoughts on Somebody's Daughter. It's just so well written. I loved it. The voice of the author is just so beautiful. I found myself seeing parts of my relationship with my mother in parts of her relationship with her mother, and and even if it's not even my relationship with my mother, but like relationship with women in my family and things that have been said to me, responsibilities that were placed on me that shouldn't have been. It was so great. Next up at number 6, we have Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This book was so damn good. I mean, Octavia E. Butler might as well be That's So Raven. Sis saw the future, wrote a book about it, and presented it to us all so that we wouldn't make the mistakes of the characters in this book, and yet we still freaking did. I mean, from natural disasters that occurred, from the political leader in this book being very indicative of the US's 45th president, like so much this woman predicted, and still we made the mistakes that were laid out in front before us prior to them occurring. We could have stopped them. This is why a school list should have more than just male white authors, because we could have learned so much from Octavia E. Butler. Parable of the Sower follows a young girl to an adult woman who is in this world that is just all the worst parts of humanity. I mean, people are horrible. The worst, like I said, the worst parts of humanity is humanity in this world. Like, just no one cares about anyone. It is just about your own individual survival, and it is so hard to read at times. I'm not going to lie. I even have a hard time saying some of the content warnings for this one, so please look in the description box, because when I tell you I was sad for the entirety of reading this book, and yet I still loved it so much. I was sad. It is just heartbreak boulevard it's just heart-wrenching what this. It's not even like the characters have to go through, which yes, what the characters have to go through, but the people in this world. I just found myself feeling so much for them and feeling very empathetic towards their situation, which brings us to our main character, who is a hyper empath, I believe is the word. And so she can actually feel other people's emotions, but also their feelings. So if somebody were to get hurt in front of her and she saw them get hurt, she would be able to feel that pain herself. Very dangerous ability to have in this world, and yet she uses that hyper empathy, and she uses her past of growing up in a church. Her father was a preacher. She uses her understandings of religion, uses her experience as a hyper empath and her insights of this world to create a religion of her own, really, and a doctrine of her own that she feels embodies humanity in the place that they are currently at in this setting. And it's just about the beginning of that story, the beginning of her creating what turns into being a religion. And it's just so great. I think something that really spoke to me about this book is that as a hyper empath, she is very aware of the injustice, the ugliness of the world, and like the pain and the danger that it exhibits in this world. And yet she still has these moments where she is still hopeful that things can get better, which I personally appreciated as a person that works in the nonprofit field. It was very similar to myself and other people that I work with, of like, we are confronted with the injustices of the world all the time, and we are fighting tooth and nail for there to be something better for our communities and other things. And so although we're confronted with some ugliness and truth of the way our society is set up, we still have hope that not only us but other people can create a better community, a better world for generations coming up. And that's something that I kind of caught onto when it came to that character. And I don't know if that was just me projecting or if it was right there, but that's at least what I took away from the book. And I'm very excited to get to the second one eventually. But I needed a break because it is such a sad world, like such a sad world that they are in. And I could not be in that world for any longer. So this year, I hopefully will get to the second book. Next up at number 5, I have The Final Strife by Sarah L. Arifi. The Final Strife is so damn good. First of all, why is this book so pretty? Like, the cover is beautiful, the book is beautiful, it is just so great. The Final Strife follows a society in which there are 3 classes, and the classes are dictated by the color of your blood. So there are people by the names of ghostings who have clear blood. Ghostings with clear blood are like the lowest class. No one respects them. They are like the servants, honestly, like the slaves. I believe they are paid a little bit, but it's so little. They're given the jobs that nobody wants. They're highly disrespected and just completely abused. In fact, due to a rebellion that happened centuries before the beginning of this book, the ghostings, all of their people from the age of 2 are brutalized and have their limbs and tongues cut out. Content warnings will be down below. This book, oh my god, had so many that I can't even name. I just knew it was horrible. So content warnings down below. Description box is your best friend for this video. So the ghostings are considered the lowest class in the society. Next up are the blue bloods. I forget their names in the society, but they have blue blood and they're like the working class, also not respected, also given like labor jobs and not really cared for. They are placed in the society and the professions simply based on what the society needs at that time, not even based on what their talents and their abilities are. And next there are those who have red blood, and they are the upper echelons of the society. They are seen as these great people, great warriors. They hold all the powers. They are responsible for keeping everyone in line, keeping the blue bloods and the ghostings in line. They're just such terrible people. However, some years ago, a rebellious group came and took a group of red-blooded toddlers and babies and replaced them with their blue-blooded children so that these red-blooded individuals could grow up with blue bloods and learn that they're not as bad as red bloods would tell you they are. They are not lesser than them. We are all people, essentially. And then would enter into this competition to gain the title of somebody with power, essentially. Within the red bloods, there are guardians, or like higher positioned individuals that hold like all the power within it. And so to be one of these people, you need to enter a competition and prove that you are one of the strongest of the red blooded individuals. And so those children who were kidnapped were trained so that they could then enter that competition and hold some power some way, somehow. Okay, and so we followed 3 women within each of those classes. So we have Scylla, Anor, and Hassa. Hassa is my favorite. She is a ghosting. She is the smartest out of all the main characters, and I needed more Hassa, to be completely honest. And then we have Anor, who is raised with it among the red bloods, and we have Scylla, who was raised among the blue bloods. She is in the working class. Due to events in Scylla's past, she is dealing with a lot of trauma, a lot of PTSD, and just a lot of mental health concerns. She's dealing with substance dependency. She's dealing with a lot. And for the most part, we are reading this book through Scylla's perspective, and it is just so heart-wrenching to want so much for this character who cannot find it in herself to actually have all that she deserves. Like, she's just feeling so much pity. She's just feeling so much pain and anger and frustration from the event that occurred in her past. She is dealing with PTSD. So there is a lot of self-sabotage that occurs within Scylla's story, and it's just heartbreaking because I'm like, I know you are strong. I know that your potential is so much greater than what you are demonstrating, and yet because of her substance dependency, a lot of that is hindered. And even as she goes on this journey towards recovery and not depending on the drug anymore, the drug of this world anymore, and not being dependent on the substance, she still, due to the harm that's already created in her body, she still can't even match up to who she would have been if she didn't have to deal with these concerns. And it's just so heartbreaking. I think the only character I haven't mentioned is Anor, which that is because at the beginning of the book, I could not stand Anor. She just, again, she grew up with the red bloods and the upper echelons. Her mom has a very high position in the society, and although her mom is a horrible woman who abused her child, and Honor has gone through a lot, there was a lot of naivety that she demonstrated that I felt like was on purpose. And there's one thing to be naive and you're just naive, and then there's another thing to be willfully ignorant, which is what I thought Honor was. And then as her character grew and developed, I these characters had the most amazing growth I have seen in a book, and political intrigue, vast, like well described, easy to obtain world. It was so great. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we're in the final four. But next up, at number 4, we have Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola. This book, this book is everything that's right in the world, okay? Coming after like 2 books that were like everything wrong with the world, Honey and Spice is everything that is right, okay? Ooh, no, that didn't rhyme. But it sounded like it did for a minute. Honey and Spice follows Kiki. Her name is Kiki. If you don't know, my family nickname is Kiki, so I already was in love with this character. So it follows Kiki, who is a radio personality at her university. She gives relationship and dating advice on her radio show, and she's a pretty great student. I mean, she is where everyone goes to for advice. All until this new boy comes onto campus, and he is just going through the groups, okay? The groups of women. All of a sudden, all the questions of advice Kiki is having to answer on her radio show has to do with this food. And of course, that leaves a nasty taste in Kiki's mouth when it comes to her impressions of this new guy in town by the name of Malachi. But you know, desperate situations call for desperate actions, and in an act of self-sacrifice, self-preservation, honestly, Kiki ends up kissing Malachi at a party, and all hell breaks loose. All of a sudden, the viewers who have loved her loyally and those who were just listening and say that Kiki is a huge hypocrite and are mad at her, which forces her to end up in a fake dating situation with Malachi, this guy that I'm not gonna say she hates him because he hasn't been in town enough for anybody to hate him. Well, except for maybe the girl said he's wronged. And she ends up having to be in this fake dating situation with Malachi for her radio numbers to stay going up because she is up for this summer program. And it is just the cutest, warmest, just greatest book ever. Like, it's just so nice. It's not too serious, it's just fun, and I love Kiki's friend group that she finds herself in. I love her back and forth and banter with Malachi. I love Malachi, who was described as a cross between Morris Chestnut and Kofi Cerebral. And if you were like, literally, main character's name is Kiki. She, I think, is like a journalism major, and the main love interest is a cross between Morris Chestnut and Kofi Cerebral. If you wanted to write a book for me, just say that then. I would have liked to have a notice. Like, the main character, we share a name. Her love interest is all that I would want in a man. And she's also a journalism major. I mean, just say that. Just say you want to write a book for me, and I will read it. Because this book seems to be customly made for me. I did read it, and I absolutely enjoyed every single moment of it. It was so cute. Next up at number 3, I have yet another memoir, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This book is so dang good. Jeanette McCurdy's writing style, beautiful. For her to be writing about some things that are really hard to read about when it comes to her relationship with her mother, when it comes to the abuse, both mentally, emotionally, and physically that she experienced with her mother, as well as her relationship with food and having an eating disorder and how she developed that and how she's dealt with that, dealing with grieving or acknowledging the grief of a parent who harmed you. All of these really heartbreaking situations, really heart-aching situations, and yet she found a way to be humorous in it. How? I do not know. Her writing style in the book ages with her, and so as we're introduced to her as a young girl, the writing seems very young and innocent and just very trusting of her mother. And then as she gets older, there's this like rebellious, secretive edge to her as she tries to hide things from her mother. And then as she gets older, it's just like reflective and thinking about her relationships and things that have gone wrong in them, and how can she evolve and how can she grow and heal from them. and it was therapeutic. It was just so beautiful and so well crafted. I adored this memoir. I mean, it's number 3 on this list for a reason. No other memoir made it this high. Pause this video right now. What do you think are my top 2 books of 2022? Pause it, put them down in the comment section, let a girl know. I am very curious if y'all know, because honestly, they were going back and forth this entire time on the list. I was like, I love this one more, and I was like, no, I love this one more, and then this one. So let me know, what do you think are my top 2 books in the order that you think they go. So what do you think is my second favorite book of the year, and what do you think is my favorite book of 2022? Y'all ready? At number 2, my second favorite book of 2022, Babel by R.F. Kuang. This book, so freaking beautiful. Absolutely my favorite book by R.F. Kuang. I mean, from the characters, from the commentary, from the fact that it's making people mad. I mean, R.F. Kuang really did that. Her voice in this book, which we more prevalently see in the footnotes and in the author's note at the beginning, the like sass, the just, I don't care, I'm simply going to write this story as I want it to be written. My goodness, so dang good. It is so dang good. I loved all the characters. I was just hooked by each of the characters, and there were decisions and people that made me angry. There were decisions that characters I loved made that made me angry. This black and white and gray among all of them that was just so well crafted and well done. I do have an entire video on a Babel Talks. Instead of going into detail again, there's just that video, because I'm literally just going to restate everything I've already stated before. The characters were well crafted. The way the story progresses, the title of the book, an alternate title for the book, discusses like the necessity of violence. You see, there was routes that were taken, there was hesitation, there was so much that led to it, there needing to be violence. There was ignoring that was happening, there was a disregard for others' culture, there was using human beings as weapons to your own agenda. There was so much happening that finally led to the necessity of violence, and there was so much self-doubt. There was friendships being pulled at and tugged on, and it was just so much and so beautiful. I mean, for the most part, we are in the perspective of Robin and the mental hurdles and barriers that Robin had to overcome growing up in Canton and then going to school in England and being in a space of academia in that sense, and then just seeing what the British Empire is trying to do to his homeland that honestly no longer feels like home since he's been away from it for so long. I mean, complex characters. My goodness. I also realized I didn't give a synopsis for this one. But if you do not know, how can I say, I knew R. Kuang wrote Babel, and that was about all I knew about this book, and that's how I wanted it. So I'm going to give you guys a very vague synopsis of it. If you want a non-vague synopsis, go to somebody else. But for those of you that want to be surprised by it, like I want it to be, and like I was, here we are. Babel follows 4 young students, mainly from the perspective of Robin, though, as they entered Oxford as translators who would be responsible for the upkeep of the society. And translators in this world have this ability to metal work, and with their metal work they can help with construction, they can help with factories, they can help with armed forces, and you know, the more imperial part of a empire. And it's all about how language drives a society, drives an empire, and how an empire forces themselves onto those that they want to colonize using language and refusing to learn other languages because they believe that their way is the only way, and needing to use people from these places to further their own imperial gains. It's just, that's not even that great of a synopsis, but it's enough for you to, I hope it's enough for you to be curious. So just go in, okay? Just read the book. It's so good. I don't even know if I can describe Babel to the extent that it should be described, because it is just so great. If you want great characters, if you want to be angry, if you want to hear about history from the perspective of the colonized instead of the colonizers, if you want to hear a vast perspective of stories, if you care to learn more and to educate yourself more on perspectives that go beyond your own, read Babel. It was so, my brain is broken. My brain is broken. It is just so well done. R.F. Kuang did that, solidified herself as one of my favorite authors with this book. This is my absolute favorite R.F. Kuang book that I've read. I have read the entire Poppy War trilogy, but Babel is that girl, okay? For me personally, Babel is that girl. And next up at number 1, if you know that Babel's number 2, you probably guess what number 1 is. Actually, I don't think this book made it into any of my vlogs. This book actually hasn't made it into any of my videos. And so if you've just been following me on social media, then you probably know what book I'm going to say. If you haven't, you should follow me on social media, because when I'm not present here, I am present on Instagram. So, you know, you'll find me somewhere at some time. But my number 1 book of 2022, Blood Marked by Tracy Deonn. I waited all year for this book. They kept pushing back the release date and I kept waiting patiently. Not that patiently, if I'm being honest, but I waited and I read it and I loved it. Blood Marked, the second book after Legendborn. Oh my god, I can't even talk about this book a lot because it's the second book in a series. Okay, cool. Legendborn follows Bree though, and Bree has just lost her mother, and so she decides to attend a college program in which, as a 16-year-old, she is able to go to college early because she's just that smart and just that badass. And she uses this program to distract herself from the grief of losing her mother. That is until she comes across a society of people who she thinks might just have something to do with her mother's death. These people now also have something to do with Arthurian legend, and it's just, oh, it's mind-blowing on how a little black girl found herself with Merlin author in them. Like, how, I remember hearing about Legendborn and just being like, huh? How someone like us get there? How we get over there? And then you find out in Legendborn how a little black girl got over there, and it's but Blood Marked, even more so than Legendborn. Like, I read Legendborn and I was like, this is everything I've ever needed from fantasy, due to themes of inheriting aspects of yourself from your ancestors and how your ancestors are always with you and guiding you on this path of sorts. And going into Blood Marked, being excited to reestablish the setting, there was this constant mention of a phrase that I hope is not a spoiler, but you know, skip like 10 seconds from here if just in case you don't want to be spoiled at all. But the repetition of the phrase, "they ran so that I could fight," just dagger to my heart. It was just so beautiful, and every time it was mentioned, and then the evolution of that phrase, which absolutely is a spoiler, I felt like was even more impactful. Because sometimes when you know for a fact, especially as a black woman, when you know for a fact, like, those before you had to fight, they had to make sacrifices, they had to do a lot so that you can be in the place that you are, and acknowledging that and acknowledging the sacrifice that they made so that you wouldn't have to sacrifice any longer. Just found the messaging in Blood Marked to be even more beautiful. Legendborn was like, your ancestors are always with you, guiding you on this path. Blood Marked was like, see, I can't not talk about Blood Marked without spoiling it. But just real quick spoiler for Blood Marked. I'll mark it on the screen, I'm sorry. But the juxtaposition between Legendborn and Bloodmarked, of Legendborn being like, your ancestors are always with you, guiding you on this path, and Bloodmarked being like, first of all, they ran so that I could fight, and then the evolution of that saying being, they ran so that I could stay still, so that I could just be. I am not a weapon. I am not something for someone else to use. I am not going to fight just because I was born into this family, just because I inherited such things. I can choose not to fight it. I can choose just to exist. Won't make me cry then. And when Brie met her mom, oh god. Bloodmarked, it was so good. There was just so much more when it came to ancestors, and I'm trying so hard not to spoil, but Brie has gone through a lot, and in this book she goes through even more, and I loved how each part was like its own separate thing. And yes, it ended on a cliffhanger that makes you want to go into the next part, but even that part is a part on itself. Like, by themselves, these parts are able to stand and be great, but together they are fantastic. I fucking love this book so much. Brie as a main character, her friendships, and Sal's progression as a character, her best friend Alice always being there, a true ride or die. Nick. I mean, it was just so much. Like, they've gone through so much in this book, and I, like, where's the third one? Hey, Tracy, Dion, hi, friend. Please notice me. I love everything that you do. I'm just so happy for you as a person and a human being, and the greatness that you were able to write. Hi, my name is Kalia, and I would really love it if I could get if I can get an early copy, an art copy of the next book whenever it's time for arcs. I don't care what I have to do with this channel for Tracy Dion to be able to see it, but I need to read that third book like yesterday. This cliffhanger was so much worse than the one in Legendborn. I want this third book way more than I wanted Bloodmarked, and I really wanted Bloodmarked. I'm just gonna keep rereading the books though until that third book comes, I guess. Okay, yep. That's just how I'm going to go with Bloodmarked. I'm sorry, it's the second book. There's a lot I could not say because it would be a spoiler. Just know it was great. It was greater than greatness already was when it came to Legendborn. Like, I don't know how she made it better, but she did. The story got better. I might just have a heart attack with the third book if this is how we're going, because my heart cannot take it anymore. Those are my top 10 books of 2022. What were some of your favorite books of 2022? Let me know down below. If you do not know what to comment but would like to comment something, go ahead and leave a drop of blood emoji, because not only is Bloodmarked my favorite book of 2022, but there is a lot of blood in this list. Bloodmarked, The Blood Trials, The Way to Blood. I mean, my goodness, Kalia. Tell me how you really feel, sis. But yeah, those are my favorite books of 2023. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed my face, my voice, my actionness, go ahead and press that like button down below and press the subscribe button and bell notification if you'd like to be notified when I upload. If you would like to stay connected with me, as I would love to stay connected with you, I of course will have all my social medias linked down below as well. And if you'd like to support this channel further, I will have my Amazon wishlist linked down below as well. With that being said, I believe that that is everything, although I am probably forgetting something because I always forget something. But bye guys.